The sun has left and forgotten me. It's dark, I cannot
Your stories don't define
see.
you, but how you tell them will. I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief storymaker at Elkins Consulting. Friends, you're in luck today. You're going to hear from my friend Nikki that is here in Helena, Montana, and we're sitting on the couch in my living room next to a fire with our cups of tea and coffee and getting ready to have a conversation that you get to sit in on and pretend like you're sitting here with us. Nikki, thank you so much for joining me today.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for asking me to do this with you. It is just, I just think the world of you. It's an honor to be here and especially be in this cozy space to have our conversation.
I'm excited for this because we met a few years ago through our mutual friend, Christine Mills, who does a lot of hiking. She's an avid hiker. And she creates community around that activity. And I've met quite a few wonderful women through her and our hikes together. And I remember the first time you and I were on a hike together. I don't remember which hike it was, but I remember walking away from that and thinking, this is somebody I want to know more about. So it's taken a few years of us kind of talking periodically back and forth through Christine to finally actually exchange numbers and talk outside of that environment.
Yeah. And to think we thought about finally coming together to do something like this at the start of the new year. We were on the New Year's Day hike that Christine put together. And I remember you and I talking about this conference that you help, put together. And then I came to your workspace and it turned into a vision board, get together, which turned into this long conversation that you and I had. And you asked me to be on this podcast. And I remember walking away from it going, oh my gosh, I am so excited to do this because you do things by way of like, you're a change maker. You are a storyteller, but you're also a change maker. What you say has depth and meaning. And those are the types of people that I like to be around, or people that just have this energy that I can really identify with. So I'm just so excited. We're finally doing
this. Well, let's start with what I like to do with all of the beginnings of these conversations by having you share something about yourself that most people might not know about you. Mm-hmm. And I know in our circles, I don't know a lot about you anyway, so this should be an easy question for you to answer. The reason I like to do this is that it offers a complexity in viewing who you are based on what you tell us now. So our listeners get this one version of you, and then they get to hear the complexity of who you are, where you came from, the things that matter to you as we walk through the rest of the discussion. One of the things that I get really frustrated with is when people make a decision about a person based on one interaction or one conversation. Mm-hmm. And a woman that I used to spend time with, Amber Johnson, she's here in Helena, she described it as freezing a person in time. Mm-hmm. And since I heard her say that, I've realized that we see each other so dimensionally. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's a word.
It is today.
It is today. And it's so sad because we don't like to be seen that way.
Right.
We don't like to be labeled from one thing, one mistake we make, or one thing somebody overhears out of context. And so why do we do that to other people? So too much explanation for the question I just asked you, but what do you have to share with us?
So interesting. I really identify with the way you just approached me talking about this piece. I always joke, long story long,
Yes,
I do the same, like long story short. No, not with me, not when you're talking with me. I'm really, how much time do you have? Today. I think it's important to know that where a person currently is, you do have to understand where they're coming from, why they think the way that they do, why they do the things that they do. Why they lead their life the way that they do. I think the coolest thing I've ever read was, I don't want to say I'm, here, full disclosure, 42 years old. I want to say I'm on level 42. It just sounds a lot cooler because really our life is built of levels. Like you grow from your experiences. And I have been through quite a lot of experiences that have brought me where I'm at today. Believe it or not, people listening to this podcast, a good portion of them probably know my story. I actually had the honor of doing a TED Talk on it a few years ago here in Helena, that I'm a brain injury survivor, brain trauma survivor. It happened when I was really, really young. I was 3 years old. They say that neurologically, you don't really start to, obtain memories or form memories or really remember things until you're about 5 years of age. But I remember how it happened. I remember being at my grandma's house. My mom had to go run an errand and she left me with my grandma and my cousin, Matt. And my cousin Matt and I, we were on a tire swing. I was swinging on a tire swing. When I was little, I was a little bitty thing. That's how I got the nickname Beanie. Shout out to my mom for giving me the nickname Beanie. I was a tiny little thing. And my cousin was swinging me on a tire swing. And I remember I got off of the tire swing and my grandma had a phone call and she went into the house. And so it was just he and I in the front yard. And I remember him saying, "One more time, Nicole." And I said, "Okay." And I went head first through the tire. So I was laying on my stomach and he got up on a picnic table and took me with him and he swung me forward. And from 15 feet in the air, the tire swing rotated and I came in contact with the oak tree on the left side of my head and fell out of the tire swing and was crying and all of that. And my grandma came out and she noticed that, something had happened and went inside and there was no bleeding or anything. It just, I had hit my head and all of that. And my mom came back. And my cousin Matt ran out to her and said, "Nicole hit her head." And when she came into the house, I was laying on the couch, I was crying and all of that. But again, there was no lacerations, nothing physical so my mom didn't know really the breadth of what had happened. And I don't blame my cousin. I don't blame my grandma. It happened.
Accidents happen.
It was an accident. Right. And I remember, my mom took me home and all of that. Long story short, my mom was doing my hair, I think it was the next morning. And I had a very hard night of, being ill and all of that, which of course happens when you sustain a concussion.
Right.
And my mom was braiding my hair in the morning and it was a very overcast day. And she said that I had said to her, "Mom, can you close the blinds? It's bright." And she looked at my face. And the one thing that my mom is very intuitive. She knows her kids. And she looked at my face and my pupils were as big as my irises. And so she knew something was up. So took me to the doctor. My doctor had just gotten out of medical school. And Dr. Chrisberg, if you're hearing this, thank you for everything. He took a look at me and they decided to get me down to Children's Memorial in Chicago. And they did a CT scan. And at the time, I was coherent. I was fine. And a nurse came in named Cindy, who to this day is my angel. She's a big part of my life. And I was sitting on her lap and she was, kind of keeping me calm and all of that. And they looked at my scans and I had black completely. And the front part of my skull was completely black. And so when they saw that on the CT scan, they immediately got me into surgery because that meant I had bleeding. And as I understand, my mom is very good at kind of relaying the clinical aspects of what this was. But I had what was called an epidural hematoma, and I had bleeding between the skin and the skull of my brain. What we didn't know at the time is that my brain stem went past midline. Oh. And so if I had hit that tree in any of a different way, there is the possibility that I would have died. And they did the surgery, and I had 48 hours for them to observe me to see if I would be in a vegetative state for the rest of my life. And I am from the school of the power of prayer, the universe, whatever you want to call it. But my grandma hunkered down with her altar and rosary society, and everybody was praying and all of that. I came through surgery not needing any physical therapy, not needing any speech therapy. When the surgeons came into my room after they had done the surgery, I, of course, you have the bandages and all that. And they came to test me cognitively. I knew my mom and dad. My dad had bought me the entire fleet of My Little Ponies and put them around my bed. I named every single little pony. And I remember the surgeons looked at my parents and said, that should not be happening. I went into the hospital to have all of this done on a Sunday, and I was discharged by Thursday.
It's crazy.
Just crazy. And I hear that now as a 42-year-old woman. I heard that, all growing up. And the thing that I didn't know is that there was a lot that went on in the background with my dad. My dad was a mortician at the time, and he reserved me a table like I was not supposed to survive. My mom was pregnant with my sister. She went into premature labor. They calmed her down, all of that. There was just a lot with this story. And that's what I heard about my entire life growing up was this. And I always thought, why did this happen? Why, that's the major mystery of life, right? Like, why did these things happen to us? The second thing is that I have a sister with intellectual disability. Her name's Ashley, and she's 38 years old. She lives back in the Chicagoland area. So I grew up with a sister with a sibling with a disability, rather. My childhood was just very different. And I was surrounded with a lot of love, a lot of really positive people in my life. My mom, my grandma Shinneman, my grandpa, who was a big jazz musician. I grew up with a lot of music, with a lot of, performance art and all that kind of stuff. And I always wanted to perform. I always wanted to be on a stage. And as I got older, I realized why I wanted to perform and for what purpose. And it used to be that I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to entertain people. But I realized as I've gotten older that it's to educate people on the importance of taking care of your body, taking care of your brain, taking care of your spirit. Because with any, after sustaining any sort of type of trauma, any sort of, whether it's, psychological, physical, whatever, there are things that you can have as a secondary characteristic. Maybe it's some anxiety. Maybe it's, memories that trigger you or things of that nature. And you can either let it dissolve you or you can let it evolve you. And for a lot of my time in my childhood and as I got older, being in school and things like that, I had a great high school, college experience, but I always had that feeling of low self-worth. I always had that feeling of anxiety. I always had that feeling of depression. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized that that could be a secondary outcome from maybe sustaining a brain injury, along with, things that you might experience as a child. I kind of lived in a little bit of a stressful household, but as you get older, you learn to kind of reframe. Maybe there were reasons why that was the way it was. And you start to learn from your anxiety. You start to learn from your depression. You start to learn from things that you've experienced and kind of change the way that you perceive why it happened to you. And maybe help it to be your fuel instead of your fervor, which I know is kind of a dated word, but I use it. Instead of letting it destroy you and bring you down and that voice be what defines you. Maybe you turn it around and have it help you become what you're supposed to be, be the version of yourself that you were put on earth here to be. And so it took me a very long time to think that way. So and all stemming from an injury that almost ended my life too early. But God said, nope, not done with you. You're getting through this, and there's reasons why. You're not going to know why for a while, but you'll figure it out.
I think it's interesting that people go one way or another with that kind of experience. And maybe it was partly because you were so young. Maybe it was partly because you had all this love around you that you wondered why you survived.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting to me that so many people, when they have an experience like that, they go the other direction.
Right.
I survived because I'm a survivor and I have something to do on this planet.
Yeah.
Like right away, they have that experience, right? I survived for a reason. How am I going to use this gift?
Right.
And it seems to me by listening to your story that you didn't arrive there until much later in life, arriving at that point where, oh, wait a minute, I was given this second chance. What am I going to do with this wild and beautiful second chance I've been given?
Right. Right. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. For a time, there were other things that kind of dictated, my life in the sense of like, I had a brain injury. That's why I'm bad at math. I had a brain injury. That's why I have anxiety. It was more of like, I was my brain injury. And it was never like, there's a reason here. At least when I was younger, it never was that. It was always my mom saying, my mom telling me that you're a miracle. There's a reason why you're here and all of that. And, as you get older, you have to learn what that reason is and not blame your, I guess you could say, maybe the things that you aren't the strongest at.
Your circumstances.
Yeah, blame your circumstances on your history,
right?
It got you to where you currently are. And so, yeah, I completely agree with that and I have had the honor, the pleasure, whatever you want to call it, of working with people that they come in and they have that mindset of like, I had this injury. I have this issue. I have this anxiety. I have this depression. And everything just sucks.
Right.
Everything just is horrible. And it's all because of my anxiety. It's because I am this way.
Right.
And instead of using it to their advantage of like, why am I experiencing this right now? What is the root cause of the way I'm experiencing the world around me, the way that I'm experiencing my life right now? What is the root cause? What is it? And it wasn't until I was much older that I realized there were things that happened way, way, way back when in my childhood that was the root.
Right.
And I was building, my branches were stemming from this root of maybe these circumstances that I was in or these things that I experienced either, through things that maybe, my dad did or there was a circumstance at school or, you were bullied or something like that. Like, that's my root. Okay, now what am I going to do with that?
Right. How do I use that not only for my own life and to improve my relationships now that I know that that's what the cause is,
right?
But how do I share this with other people and help contribute to somebody else's roots being more strong in a positive way?
Absolutely.
And how do we contribute? I keep coming back to this idea of community, and this has been a thing for decades for me. And one of the things that keeps coming back to my conscious is when you talk about growing up in pretty idyllic circumstances compared to other people, everything's relative, where you grew up in this. And so having any kind of trauma, for lack of a better word, is going to be very relative for you, right? So when I think about that community, I think sometimes because some of us grow up in that kind of idyllic community, we don't own our experiences because they seem less than somebody else's.
Yeah.
I know, I actually said this right after the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel. And I was experiencing a lot of anti-Semitism. I was seeing it directly at me. I was seeing it toward, my people, our people, I like to say, because we're all in this together. And I remember saying something to somebody, wow, it's really hard to be Jewish right now. And I stopped myself because I thought, okay, that's coming from a serious place of privilege, because I don't have to tell people I'm Jewish. They don't have to know. And so I have that luxury of not telling people. I don't take that luxury for exactly the reason that I was saying. So I don't take that luxury because I want to be able to experience this from another person's perspective in whatever way I can. And this is one way that I can do that. But people of color don't have that luxury. And it's hard to be a person of color in almost any circumstance. And there are places where it's hard to be a woman in any circumstance.
Right.
And one of my friends said, I get it. I hear you, but it can be both. It can be hard to be Jewish and it can be hard. And I said, yes, I get that. And then I came back into my head about it's all relative.
Mm-hmm.
Your trauma, your experience is relative to your life.
Right.
So when you think back on your family and the people who supported you and loved you, how do you think that contributed to this feeling of, I wonder if it's a feeling of not taking advantage of this second chance. That's where I keep coming back to, is all of that love and support maybe contributed to that anxiety of, my mom thinks I should be a miracle. My mom thinks I have more to do, but I don't see it in myself.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's interesting you asked that question, because I try really hard when I'm talking with somebody not to try and formulate what I'm going to say in response. I really try to be as present as possible. My husband will vouch for that every time, we're talking. I'm just like, okay, we need to be present when we are talking. Whatever you're doing, how stuff, kind of thing. And so, this is very authentic, of a response. This is a very authentic response. And I'm not saying that I grew up in, this, world of, high level privilege or anything. The one thing I am very thankful for is I saw a lot when I was a kid. I came from, my dad was the sixth child of my grandparents who were from Poland and the Ukraine, and they lived in a very modest house. It became a very dangerous neighborhood. You would call it the projects.
In Chicago.
North Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
North Chicago. It was not the safest place to go when we would go visit my grandparents. And so I would see that. I would see the poverty. We would drive by, the low income housing and the, all of that. And then you would go to the other side of the coin over in Waukegan, Illinois, where my grandma and grandpa Shuneman lived. And it was a very nice area. And so I did see.
You can see both.
I was able to see both. Both sets of grandparents were byproducts of the Great Depression. So there was a lot of hoarding. The one thing I appreciated about my grandma, I don't know if appreciate is the right word, but I remember her using every bit of ketchup, filling it with water, watering down the suntan lotion, only making half of the packet of Kool-Aid, there was a lot of tension.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up. My dad put a lot of pressure on himself. He worked really hard to make us have a really great life. He struggled a lot with, I think, the stories he told himself, right, based off of how he was brought up, always wanting to prove himself. But he worked hard. He really worked hard. He had a heck of a temper, but he worked really hard. My mom was the buffer. She and my dad had a very, I should say, lively marriage. So there was a lot of loud arguing, sarcasm, things like that. So I grew up around a lot of tension. Now, for a very long time, I was angry about it. For a very long time, I was the byproduct of, however you want to define whatever that time in my life was growing up. Saw a lot of things, experienced a lot of things and all of that. But it took a lot of therapy, a lot of self-realization to flip that perception as to my dad did the things the way he did because that is how he knew how to be, right? My mom did things the way she did it because that's how it made sense to her at the time. Mm-hmm. I am a byproduct of how I grew up, but in the grand scheme of things, it could have been a lot worse. Again, I also grew up differently because I had a sibling with a disability. So as someone who grew up in that way, you have a different perception in regards to people that they have cognitive disabilities, physical disabilities, in that regard. And that, I feel, along with my head trauma, brought me into the area of work that I'm in. Working with people with chronic disease, disability, and limitation, being able to identify things intuitively in regards to how they are that day, meeting them where they're at. If I hadn't have experienced all of the things I just mentioned, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So I really feel like, to go along with the theme of your podcast, those stories are what have defined my career and how I perceive the world and how I choose to carry myself and the people I choose to let into my life, the man I'm married to, the way that I treat myself. Yeah. And believe it or not, how I treat myself was really the last piece of the puzzle.
That's always
the last piece, right? Isn't it? You're so busy taking care of other people. You're so busy worrying about the external circumstances. Mm-hmm. For a long time, I was allowing those external circumstances to govern me internally. Mm-hmm. And I have to send a huge thank you to, in my opinion, the best therapist in the world, Jenna Moore, who I still meet with. She is incredible. And she really helped me to see that. She and I have been working together for the past few years. And I know they say, there should be an endpoint to therapy. No, I don't think so. Because
I disagree.
Yeah, I really feel like you need that sort of coach.
You don't stop going to the doctor.
Right. Exactly.
You don't stop going to get your hair cut.
Exactly.
You have to sustain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And she is and has been my brain coach for the last few years. And it's through her very gently yet, I'll say firm way of speaking my thoughts back to me. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I had a therapist who did that I realized, wow, that's not true. It's the thought of if someone were to say to you what you say to yourself, what would your reaction be?
I think it depends on our age.
Yes,
it really does. Because I've been thinking a lot about that lately because of an incident that I experienced recently where I inadvertently hurt somebody and damaged trust. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I do, I can't explain why, but the first thing I do is think, what did I do? Oh my gosh, I was mortified. My heart was broken. I can't believe that I would, make this mistake, all of that stuff. So the first is that internal. So if somebody said to me, wow, which she did, wow, you really hurt me. Only she didn't do it like that. Mm-hmm. my first reaction is, you're right, and I'm sorry. But I think I'm sure that this is an age thing, because if we had had this conversation 10 years ago when I was your age, I might have gotten defensive. I might have said, well, you don't talk to me like that. Or I might have gotten angry because I knew somewhere along the line that I might have done something wrong. And so I would get defensive to manage that. And I really associate this with what your therapist does, which is putting that mirror in front of you.
Yeah.
And saying, is this who you want to be? And if it is, go, do what you're doing. If you're satisfied with, when you look in the mirror, you're satisfied. You're holding that up and you're like, yeah, this is who I want to be. Warts and all. Then great. I think the majority of us, especially, I've experienced this a lot in women in their late 30s and early 40s, going through this transformation of choosing. Because before that, we kind of just went with the flow. Whatever was around us, our circumstances definitely defined how we behaved externally, with the internal trauma and dialogue going on nonstop. And I think it's that transformative time between your late 30s and your early 40s when you start thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm looking in the mirror right now and I'm not super happy with this. That's not how I want to experience myself. So when I think about the work that you do, particularly with the gym work that you do, and we'll talk about that. That's the next part of what I'd like to just, touch on. You have this opportunity to hold up the mirror for them in a way that a therapist, if they're not going to go see a therapist, which most people won't, you get to at least give them an inkling of what that might look like to seek that kind of help. To hold up the mirror and say, okay, you have these things, you have this anxiety and it sucks. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to change this? And maybe you can't get rid of anxiety, but how can I use this to like myself more? Yeah. So that said, that kind of theory that I have that I've been exploring and seeing in I wouldn't call it a scientific observation, but definitely a lot of observation over the years, probably over 1,000 people, particularly women in their late 30s, early 40s, and women I've talked to who went through that like I did. And now I'm in my early 50s. But in that context, I would love to hear a story about a client that you've worked with in your gym that you've had that opportunity. And of course, no names necessary. But I'd like to hear how that experience was for you, because I know when I coach somebody and have a satisfying relationship with my client, a satisfying interaction with my client, it helps me grow as a person. Yeah. So you already have a story in your head. Let's hear it. I see it in your eyes.
I could, oh man.
Just start with one.
Sure. I could give you so many stories. But in terms of within the, last few years, I've coached a lot of individuals that have sustained injuries. They weren't as fortunate to come out with, no post-rehabilitation, need, and coming to me like, help me fix it.
Right. Fast.
Do it now. Right. We're all about like, we want it now.
Instant gratification.
Instant gratification. Thank you. That was slipping out of my brain.
I've referred to myself as an instant gratification girl.
Yeah. So. I think we've all been guilty of that at one time or another. Mm-hmm. But most recently, I work with my husband, Paul Campbell, who owns a private training studio called The Bar in Montana City. And he does a lot of coaching, a lot of training, a lot of nutritional consulting, things like that. And I train there as well. I've been a trainer for going on 16 years. I have a certification as a behavior change specialist. And I know that's a mouthful, but basically what it means is like, I feel comfortable having those tough discussions with you as to why you want to start journey to just change yourself, whether it's, physical or more than likely physical. You want to look at your nutrition, things like that. I had a client that came to me a few years ago, and I know she's going to listen to this podcast, so she'll know who she is. Love her dearly. And she came to me through a referral because she wanted to be in a smaller space, more private, and she wasn't quite sure like what she was expecting, other than she wanted to get stronger. And she proceeded to tell me that she had gone through cancer treatment. She had had a double mastectomy. She had had a lot of complications from chemo medication, and she wanted to get strong. And that was the big thing. I want to get strong. And so we met, and she started out by telling me what she had done with her former trainer. Well, so-and-so did this with me. So-and-so did this with me. So-and-so did this with me. Well, so-and-so did it like this, and so-and-so did it like this. And the one thing that I say to a lot of clients, especially if they're coming to me in a very vulnerable state, they've been through this, that, and the other, is I don't expect you to trust me right now. I want to earn your trust. This is not going to be just a couple of sessions. This is going to be for a little bit, because I want to make sure that you feel comfortable with me, but I also want to feel like I'm doing a service for you. So she and I started working together twice a week, and slowly we started to talk more and more about the reasonings other than her cancer journey as to why she wanted to get stronger. And there were things there, things that are mentioned, and things that, this one time, this one thing happened, and I don't like not being strong. And it just kind of evolved organically over her just realizing her self-worth. And for so long, and this is very common, that when you sustain an injury, or you sustain, you go through cancer treatment, for a long time, you are the cancer. You are whatever injury. You are the brain trauma. You are the spinal cord injury. You are defined by your limitation, your injury, or whatever it is you're going through. So for a long time, that's what she was identifying as, is, cancer survivor.
I'm not good at math because I have it.
Right.
At a brain injury.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was just slowly but surely peeling back those layers as to the story she was telling herself. And I remember one day it resonated, where I said, you know what? You got a lot of gremlins. You need to tell them to F off. I want you to visualize kicking that gremlin, or that they have a big microphone in their hand and they put it down. I said, I need you to start visualizing those voices, those things that are telling you what your identity is. You need to imagine them getting smaller, or going away, or shutting a door, or putting the microphone down. They are not the true story of who you are. And she heard the word gremlins. And from that point on, she would report to me how many gremlins she told to F off every single session that we would see each other.
She's probably around my age.
Oh my God.
That movie.
She's a cool.
That's the influence of that movie,
man,
for sure.
Yeah, she is a cool lady. And she started to increase her weight. She started to try more things. She started to just give herself a chance. And she was able to get stronger, not only physically, but mentally. And the weight loss followed. And she started to get muscles where she had not seen them before. And she was like, this was what I wanted to happen, but I didn't expect it to happen this way. I wanted the muscle first and the weight loss, and then to feel better. I didn't expect reframing my thoughts and telling myself a new story would help all of that happen organically.
And if only people knew that that's how it needs to start, because otherwise none of the rest is sustainable.
Exactly. And that is the key word, Sarah, is it needs to be sustainable. And that is why I love what I do, because when I meet someone who is from the school of, and let's face it, 80s and 90s, it was how skinny can we get?
No.
What diet pills can we take? What cleanse can we do? How much working out can we do? You know, all of that. Like, I grew up in the era of like, you know, Jane Fonda, Buns of Steel, you know, Biggest Loser, all of that. And it was all that immediate gratification. And there is so much fallacy in that space of the fitness world that in order to truly achieve your goals with how you feel, how you think, how you perceive, it has to be sustainable. You have to work on it every single day. It's not just 6 weeks and you stop. It's not a 30-day challenge and you're done.
Right.
And that is what we needed to accomplish with her in her thinking, is that this is for the rest of my life. This isn't just, I'm going to see you for a few months and then I'm done and I'm fixed. That was 3 years ago. And she and I are still friends and we are still working together. And she had to take a little break because of some things, you know, that she had to take care of, but we're coming back together in March and she's just a completely different person now. And those types of clients are the ones that remind me of my why. And I think at the end of the day, in order for us to accomplish anything, we have to tie our why to it. And it may sound hokey, but I break it down to the acronym of what honors you. That's your why. What honors you? What is the thing that you are going to put in your face when it gets hard and when you have no motivation? What is that thing that is going to remind you what it's all for, why you started in the first place? And I make sure to make that very clear to my clients when we first start, is you need to formulate that in order for us to proceed, because I can't want something more than you want it. I'm not going to come to your house and pick you up when you don't want to come and work with me at the gym. I'm not going to put the weight in your hand. I'm not going to, you know.
But we have to do that with our children even. And how many of us, I know you don't have children. Well, you have all those awesome fur babies.
But they're not kids.
Yeah.
Let's be clear, you know.
They're But what I keep coming back to is that as a parent, it was really hard when the boys would struggle in school with motivation, with any kind of ambition. And your comment to me 3 weeks ago when we talked about this, you said, I can't want this more than you want it. I realized that's what I have to own for my conversations with our two boys.
Yeah.
I can't want your success more than you want your success.
Right.
I can't want you to be in school more than you want to be in school. It's not my life. It's not my path. It's not my journey.
Right.
But I love to be great company on it, which is what you are. And this brings me to something that I said to somebody a little while ago, and it continues to kind of flip around in my head. I read years ago that we don't know, or the hero doesn't know they're the hero at the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
And most of the people around that person don't necessarily know that that person is the hero in any story, in the hero's journey. Oftentimes there's a guide.
Yeah.
And I think about your mom as one of those guides, just saying, you survived for a reason.
100%.
Find your reason.
Yeah.
But not being able to tell you what that reason was. And sometimes that guide was misguiding because she couldn't have known that that felt like pressure, that it felt like when somebody says, oh, but you have so much potential, and that doesn't feel good. It means that I'm not good enough as I am.
Yeah.
To a kid, certainly for a teenage girl more than, and teenage boys.
Yeah.
In my experience. So let's bring this full circle as we wrap this up. When you talk about your client, I can see you light up. I know that this is meaningful to you. And I know part of that is that when you said the word gremlins, it popped into your own head as well. And I'm getting the impression that now you're kind of using that analogy or that visual to help in your own life. Is that accurate?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I have many gremlins.
Oh, yes.
Many, many, many gremlins. Yeah.
I don't know anyone who doesn't have gremlins.
Right. Everybody does. You're not living if you don't have gremlins. I mean, surely, if you don't have something trying to stop you from
sabotage you.
Yeah.
Right.
Then yeah.
There are saboteurs.
Yeah.
My friend Valerie Gordon calls hers Smash. That's that internal critic that gives her such a hard time. Well, who are you to think you can blah, blah, blah. And my friend Jeff Eichler also has one that he named. I can't remember. Oh, Mr. Perfect is his.
Oh, yeah.
And I love putting those together and sharing that with other people. And I think what really draws me to your stories is that sense of I'm still going, I'm still growing. Every time I offer this service to somebody who gains benefit from it, I also feel myself changing in the most positive ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, Sarah, that's a huge misconception in the fitness arena. I think maybe, dare I say, that we're getting a little bit better as an industry, being so forthright with, you have people, especially, social media is horrible in this way that you see someone as a fitness professional, posting things and sharing things, and you're going, wow, they have it all figured out. Man, their life is just epic and perfect. And wow, look at them. And not realizing that, you've heard the term highlight reel. It's the highlight reel. But I've had that said to me, is like, man, you got it all figured out. Wow. No, I don't. I've been through a lot in this brain of mine in the 42 years I've been around. I think the first time I visited a therapist was when I was 15 in high school. And I mean, it was just, I've gone through many things that have, helped cultivate the way that I live my life. And I said it just recently in a situation that I was presented with, that I had to make a decision. And I remember at the end of the conversation, when I decided to no longer continue with it, the thing that came out of my mouth, and I surprised myself, is I said, I'm not going to apologize for how I am or who I am, because it got me to where I am today. And I think that right there encompasses everything we're talking about today, is everything that you experience in your life, good, bad, ugly, whatever. It got you to where you are at presently. And it's up to you to decide if you want to keep living the same era, or if you're not happy with it, who can you bring into your circle to help you figure out how to improve upon it? Everyone is we're a work in progress, and I am a work in progress. I'm not perfect. And it's a wonderful state of being when you meet somebody who is coming to you because they see something in you that they identify with and they feel good around you. That's a huge responsibility. And I take that responsibility very seriously in every client that I work with, in that they are entrusting me with this area of their life and to help them figure out where to go next. And it's a profound responsibility, and I don't take it for granted. And I truly believe that if I hadn't have gone through the things that I've gone through growing up, I wouldn't realize the depth of why I'm.
Agreed. It was years ago, I was telling somebody that I was so relieved to finally find my magic. I was in my late 40s, and I was like, oh my gosh, I finally found what I'm really good at. And I'm just bummed I didn't find this, sooner. Why did it take me so long? And she said exactly what you just said, not quite in those words. She said, you had to have all of those experiences to get you to where you are today. You couldn't be here if it wasn't for all of the adventures that you took to get here.
Truly. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing that I keep coming back to is that humility. I know that I started feeling a little cocky a few weeks ago and then sabotaged myself. Yeah. And as much as painful as it was, because it still hurts, I'm still talking about it. I'm still thinking about how I interacted with this woman and what could have transpired to change it. nothing can change it. But what keeps coming back to me is that humility. If we continue to grow, we're going to continue to make mistakes. And how do we honor that in other people who make mistakes toward us? And how do we honor it when we make the mistake and there's nothing we can do to change it? Honoring that process, I think, is so critical. And I know that as painful as it is, it's also, I'm honoring it. I would never call it a gift because it hurt somebody and it hurt me. But I would say that it has to be something we honor, is those mistakes, the transgressions we make on our path. Because if we're not doing something, if we're not messing up, we're not trying hard enough.
Right. Yeah. Thinking outside of your comfort zone, getting outside of your comfort zone, rather, thinking outside of the box, being innovative. It comes with its mistakes and, the falls and, the missteps and whatever it is you want to call it. I think the biggest thing that I'm working on right now, and this was something that was brought to me by a good friend of mine, his name's Matt Jackson. He's a pastor for 180 Omaha that they work with men that are dealing with, treatment from substance use. And he has a very faith-based way of viewing the world and doing his work. And he's just an incredible human. And his biggest thing is putting down the sense of self, putting down the ego. It's not about you. Your ego is not your amigo, as they say. But, we're imperfect people. We're going to make mistakes. I think the important thing to realize is that we need to own up to it right away. Because the longer that you hold on to it, or you refuse to admit you're wrong, or maybe you would have done it a little bit differently, it's going to hurt you.
Yeah, it's poison.
It's not going to hurt the people around you. It's going to hurt you. So letting the...
Well, it might hurt the people around you.
Well, hurt it, right. But through you not letting go, through you not owning up to what it is that you did, and you're holding on to it, it's festering within you. You then in turn take it out on other people.
Yeah.
But that piece can be avoided if you, say you're sorry, own up to it, talk through it.
And apologize to yourself.
Apologize to yourself. Give yourself grace. That is the biggest takeaway that I can say today. I say it to my clients, and I have to remind myself all the time, is that you have to have grace with yourself and know that you're not always going to do things right. And it took me a long time to do that for myself, is to give myself grace that, okay, I said that, I did that, I got to give myself a break, but I also need to figure out how to move forward.
Right.
Instead of sitting in it.
Yeah. Nikki, this has been such a treat. I agree. So enjoyed this conversation too. For our listeners, all the links so that you can follow what Nikki is doing on her website, at the gym, and the other work that she does, it'll all be in the show notes associated with this podcast episode at elkinsconsulting.com. Nikki, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been, like I said, an honor to be here. I think the world of you, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
I'm sure we will.
I look forward to it.
Listeners, it's your turn. Were you sitting here in the living room with us and drinking some hot tea or coffee? When you think about the things that you need to give yourself grace for, what are the gremlins that you can shoo from your consciousness? Which are the gremlins that are really stopping you from moving forward? And how can you manage when you do something wrong? Manage that so that it doesn't occur again. What lessons can you learn from it? And who do you know that you can contribute to their learning and their growth as a result of claiming your own? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Send me a message at elkinsconsulting.com.
Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.